We talk a lot about immigration in America, about borders, about laws, about who is here and who isn't. But we often miss something crucial, something happening right under our noses. Millions of people live and work in America. They are called undocumented, and they are not just on the fringes of our society. They are at the very heart of our economy, propping up entire industries, building our homes, picking our food, preparing our meals, and paying billions in taxes. Most of these workers cannot even access the benefits of those taxes. This situation is so obviously broken, so economically vital, yet legally precarious. You might wonder why nobody fixed it.
We're going to explore how this deeply complex system came to be and what it truly means for all of us. To understand this, you need to know three things. First, let's talk about the sheer scale of the workforce. When we talk about undocumented immigrants, we often imagine a small, marginalized group, but the reality is far different. The latest data shows that in 2023, nearly 10 million unauthorized immigrants were part of the U.S. workforce. That's 9.7 million people. To put that in perspective, that number is roughly the entire population of Michigan. It's a significant segment of our national labor force. These aren't just abstract numbers. These are people working, contributing, and living across the country, and their presence shapes our economy in profound ways.
Second, consider the industries that rely on these workers. This isn't a phenomenon confined to a single niche sector. Undocumented workers are deeply embedded in some of America's most foundational industries. Take agriculture. Today, nearly 1 in every 4 farming workers in the U.S. is undocumented. That's 24% of the entire agricultural workforce. In construction, roughly 1 in 5 workers, or 19%, are undocumented. These are the people building our houses, our infrastructure, our cities. And it doesn't stop there. In service and hospitality, industries that employ millions and touch our daily lives, undocumented workers make up 9% of the workforce. This isn't just about certain jobs. It's about how we get our food, where we live, and how we experience everyday services. These industries depend on this labor to function as they do. Finally, we need to understand their economic impact, particularly when it comes to taxes. A common misconception is that undocumented immigrants are a drain on the system. The data tells a different story. In 2022 alone, undocumented immigrants paid an astounding $96.7 billion in taxes. Breaking that down, $59.4 billion went to federal taxes, $37.3 billion went to state and local taxes, and specifically, $25.7 billion was contributed to Social Security, with another $6.4 billion to Medicare. Crucially, most of these workers are generally ineligible to access the benefits from these programs, despite their substantial contributions. They are paying into systems that they cannot fully utilize. This isn't just about revenue, it's about a significant, unacknowledged contribution to the social safety net and public services that benefit all Americans. But these numbers only tell part of the story. They hint at a deeper, more complicated system at play, a system that both relies on these workers and often keeps them in the shadows. So how did we get here? How did millions of undocumented workers become so central to key American industries? To understand this, we need to go back in time. For decades, America's relationship with immigrant labor, especially from Mexico, was cyclical. Programs like the Bracero Program, which ran from the 1940s to the 1960s, brought millions of Mexican farm workers to the U.S. legally on temporary visas to fill labor shortages. These workers would come, work, and return home. It was a fluid system designed to match seasonal labor demands. The U.S. economy, particularly agriculture, developed a deep reliance on this flexible, often low-cost labor.
The expectation was that workers would come when needed and then leave. This was the initial system, a relatively open border with a tacit understanding of a ready labor pool just south of the border, providing essential hands for fields and factories. But that's not the whole story. Here's where it gets complicated. Beginning in the mid-1980s, U.S. immigration policy began to shift dramatically. The focus moved from managing labor flows to securing the border. Funding for border enforcement skyrocketed. Fences went up, patrols increased. The idea was to deter unauthorized crossings and solve the problem of undocumented immigration. But this intense focus on enforcement had a profound and unintended consequence. It essentially trapped millions of workers in the U.S. Think about it this way. If crossing the border was relatively easy, workers could come for a season, earn money, and then return to their families. The increased enforcement made that back-and-forth movement incredibly risky. Once you were in, trying to leave meant you might never get back. So instead of being temporary, many workers began to settle. They brought their families. They had children who were U.S. citizens. They integrated into communities. What was once a revolving door became a one-way street. This created a permanent, though unauthorized, workforce. This shift meant that the very measures designed to prevent undocumented immigration actually solidified its presence within the country. The economy still demanded the labor, perhaps even more so as industries grew, but the legal pathways for that labor remained woefully insufficient or too cumbersome. Now we can see the full picture. We have a powerful economic engine that has grown to rely on a specific type of labor that is often willing to take physically demanding jobs for lower wages and fewer benefits. At the same time, we have an immigration system that largely fails to provide adequate legal pathways for these specific labor needs. The result is a perfect storm, a massive, vulnerable workforce providing essential services in key industries, operating in the shadows. This vulnerability is not accidental, it is the feature of the system. Without legal status, workers often fear reporting wage theft, unsafe conditions, or other abuses, because doing so could lead to deportation. This creates a power imbalance that benefits some employers by allowing them to keep labor costs down.
You might be thinking, but why don't employers just hire legally? And some do. But for many industries, especially those with tight margins or fluctuating demand, the existing legal guest worker programs can be expensive, slow, and overly bureaucratic. So the informal system persists, driven by both economic demand and a legal framework that is out of step with reality. Mass deportations, while politically popular in some circles, would be economically catastrophic. Imagine agriculture losing 1 in 4 workers overnight, or construction losing 1 in 5. That's a labor shock that would send ripples through the entire economy. It's why simple solutions continue to fail. There are competing interests. Industries want cheap labor, anti-immigration groups want enforcement, workers want safety and stability, and consumers want low prices. No easy reconciliation exists within the current framework. Here's what we're really looking at. Not just an immigration issue, but a complex, deeply embedded shadow labor system that has become fundamental to how America functions. The problem isn't just about people crossing a border. It's about a structural reliance on their labor that has been allowed to fester for decades. Each piece of this puzzle contributes to the whole. The initial system created a demand for flexible, often cheap labor in industries like farming and construction. Then, increased border enforcement, paradoxically, made temporary migration almost impossible, effectively trapping millions of workers inside the U.S. This created a large, permanent, and most importantly, vulnerable workforce. Their lack of legal status means they're less able to demand fair wages or safe working conditions, which in turn makes them attractive to certain employers who benefit from lower labor costs. This system persists because, in a twisted way, it serves certain economic interests. Industries get the labor they need at a cost they can afford, which translates to lower prices for consumers. Politicians, meanwhile, can campaign on tough border security without having to confront the uncomfortable truth of the economy's reliance on these very workers. The cost of truly fixing it, which might mean higher wages, higher food prices, or massive labor shortages, is perceived as greater than the cost of maintaining this broken status quo. It's an unspoken compromise, a silent pact that keeps the gears of specific economic sectors turning. And the human consequences are profound. Consider the 5.6 million U.S. citizen children who live with at least one undocumented family member. These are American kids, growing up in families that are constantly living with the threat of separation. A mass deportation scenario isn't just an abstract economic disruption. It would devastate these families. Estimates suggest such an action could leave millions of these children without primary earners, potentially costing the U.S. over $116 billion to support their upbringing. These are not just numbers. These are real lives, real families caught in a system they didn't create, trapped by its logic. So what do we do with this understanding? This isn't just an immigration debate. It's a fundamental question about how our economy works, who it serves, and what values we prioritize. What if we genuinely acknowledged this reliance? What if we built an immigration system that recognized both our labor needs and the human dignity of these essential workers? Can a modern economy truly function without these millions of workers? Or without a legal framework that embraces them and offers a pathway to stability? Instead of viewing these workers as a problem to be eradicated, what if we saw them as an integral, if vulnerable, part of our national workforce? What if we designed immigration policy around economic reality rather than solely focusing on enforcement? It would mean a radical rethinking of our priorities. It would mean confronting the true costs and benefits of the current system. The invisible scaffolding of the American economy, a system built on the labor of millions, living in the shadows, yet essential to the light. The choice isn't if these industries need workers, but how we choose to treat them.